Welcome to the Invisible Strength, Mireille. We're really excited to have you. I was thoroughly impressed by all your accomplishments. You are a certified run coach, an AIP nutrition coach, and the first Black woman to run 200 miles from Boston to New York City, which is absolutely incredible. Can you tell us more about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Mireille Siné. Currently live in Los Angeles, California, but my family and my lineage is from Cameroon in West Africa. So I am a first generation immigrant here as well. Been here over 30 years. And I think that's, a big part of my story as well, especially when we talk about representation in the running space and within the autoimmune community as well. I'm a very active person, as you can probably tell from that intro. I've been in some sort of sport basically my whole life, but running is the one that has stuck the most. And as I grew and went through different career transitions, landing in the running space felt the most authentic, given the fact that I loved it. And then my education background as well, being able to pull in like exercise science and public health into the mix, which I think gives a unique perspective on the running coach when usually a profession that can be based on a certain look or a certain pace or getting certain times. I think when we sort of step back and look at it more holistically, we find that none of us are existing in a vacuum. So if we can sort of look at it through that lens and integrate that into like a good coaching approach that makes for more long-term successful and enjoyment of the sports.
I'm just still trying to wrap my mind around this 200-mile run.
Yeah.
Being a New Yorker myself and just knowing how long the Amtrak to Boston is, just trying to wrap my mind around that. But I know also that your coaching business is around this core principle, like train with compassion. So I'd
Mhm.
love to know what that means to you, not only as you extend compassion externally, but
Mhm.
also as you extend compassion toward yourself.
Yeah, that really just about sums it up because, having lupus and still wanting to remain active, it's like, you got to go with the flow sometimes. And sometimes the flow doesn't quite agree with what you have on the training plan.
Right.
So learning when it makes sense to pivot or to reduce mileage for that day, to cross train that day, whatever changes you have to make to the schedule, I think requires a certain level of compassion to tell yourself that you are making the right decision and that you're still on track. Having to change things doesn't like means you throw away the plan, but you're finding smarter ways to get through the plan. That might look different from other people. I think within running, you're not seeing a lot of people with autoimmune conditions just yet. I'm hoping that more people will be more vocal about their condition and within their sport. But if you're not hearing or seeing those folks who are similar to you, and all you're sort of seeing is the general like grind it out, rest is for the weak, like those general messages, I think it can start to feel a certain way when you are the person that can't grind it out the way everybody
Right.
else does. So when you can, see those messages and be okay with seeing them, but also know that, you just have to work things a little bit differently. And like I said before, it doesn't mean you throw the plan away. It doesn't mean that you're failing. It's just honestly looking for ways to work smarter.
I appreciate that so much because we talk a lot about needing to adapt and pivot because it's not going to look the same every day,
Hmm.
especially with lupus.
Hmm.
Can you take us back to when you were first diagnosed with lupus and what was that period of time like for you and how did it change your relationship with running?
Yeah. So like I said, I kind of grew up being an active kid. Prior to the lupus diagnosis, I would say I was more of a dancer. So I did a lot of like street teams and competitions and hip hop and choreography. And I only started getting more into running like later on into high school and then definitely into college because I was an exercise science major and it was just like fascinating to learn, physiology and the background of running, I would say. And so it became sort of like my workout anchor. And so I'm in college at the time and it's pretty hectic. Being a first gen immigrant, I am the first person in my family to go through schooling in America from kindergarten on, with the exception of like my dad and my parents being somewhat educated in Cameroon and coming here. But as that first gen immigrant, it's like no one's really telling me how to take on college. And so I was not doing the best combination of classes together, kind of figuring out like where do I build community? How do I build community? And then there's the pressure to like, graduate and take a certain job and do all that. So that's all bubbling in with the stress of college. And I start to notice that I'm not handling this very well. I start to have joint pain, have real difficulty getting out of bed because of the pain, swelling in my joints, difficulty walking around campus. And it was slow, 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 so slow. And then all of a sudden, everything just starts to fall on me. As I started to notice these differences, that's when I to my credit, started going to community clinics and trying to get labs and things like that because I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know what. And as things progressively got worse, I had a blood clot, which we wouldn't find out till later. But when I started to see more of the physical differences in my skin and in my joints and things like that, that's when I was like, okay, we have to, community clinic might not cut it. Maybe we should go to the ER or something. No one had answers. My parents couldn't really say someone in our family history that was exhibiting similar symptoms. So it was just like, no clue for anybody. And it wasn't until I went to the ER, maybe my second or third time, I showed them my hand that was starting to turn black because of the clot, which we would find later. And they're like, okay, let's admit you this time. I was like, well, okay. There's signs of trauma. I don't think I even accepted it until maybe 2 days later when I was in the ICU bed, because as I'm waiting to like get accepted and they're making my charts, I feel part relief that I got to this point, like I am moving forward, but also it's a total unknown. Like at this point, I'm maybe a year off of graduation, year and a half. I'm wondering like, school's about to start in a month. Like, what is it? What does the timeline look like now? And I was in hospital about a week and a half. They resolved the blood clots. They gave me, that's where I actually got the lupus diagnosis. It was just sort of like a tentative thing in some previous visits. And I was like, okay, we have a name for it. This is the usual progression. You're going to have to do chemo because it's pretty aggressive. And I'm just taking in information. And I'm also just like, okay, but I can go back to school in a month, right? Like this is, it'll be over, right? We have a name, we have a meds. Let's keep going forward. And that was not the way my story rolled out. So I ended up taking a medical leave for about 6 months for that semester to do the chemotherapy and to really try and move towards remission. And I couldn't work out. I could barely walk without being in pain and losing my breath. I was a complete 180 from the level of fitness where I was before. I had started training for my second 5K and I was super excited about that. I was in the gym and doing strength training. And now I couldn't walk without having to take rest breaks. So it was about a year and a half of going through treatment, adjusting medication, getting used to a medication regimen because I never had to take that many pills in my life before. Before I started to feel better, I asked my rheumatologist, what's it looking like on the movement front? Can I go back to the gym? Can I go back to running? Once he gave me the okay, that was pretty much it. Getting the okay and being excited, but also like then not being able to tell me what it is I could actually do. So I went back to what I was doing before, which was, it sucked and it was painful because every time you take a break from activity, coming back feels 10 times worse. You're a beginner again. So that's what I decided to do. I went back to running specifically because I could do it solo. I could go out on my own time. I had the gear already. So it's just a matter of trying and seeing if I could run through our campus for about a mile. Very hard in the beginning, but eventually we got there. I also chose running because it was very measurable. I could see how far along I was getting better by how much I could run more than I could walk, how much the joint pain surpassed, how much I didn't need 2 days between a run. Maybe I could just need 1 day between a run before I could try again. So for me, it was like looking at those little details really that would tell me that, okay, maybe a week ago we did a quarter of a mile without stopping. Let's see if we can go half a mile without stopping.
I'm just hearing your tenacity jump out because it could have been something where you decided, you know what, running a mile is enough. You could have just said, you know, this is a lot. Like, it's okay to just stay where we are and just allow this to be the new normal. But you didn't give up. What was that specific moment, or like where are you gleaning from in your experience, your life, maybe the voice of the elders, the folks around you? Like, what was that inspiration to not lower your standards?
At the time, I looked at running as something that was specifically for me, something that was more within my control. Once I got that better and I re-enrolled in school to work towards graduation, yes, that's for me, but that's partly to also show my parents I'm going to start and finish this thing. I wanted it to get it over with, of course, to move away from that environment. But the honest answer would be I want to finish the degree so they can see the degree. Running, no one else in my family runs. And so even to my parents, it was confusing at first. They thought it was going to do more harm than good, especially seeing how sick I had gotten. But internally, I just felt like it was something that I could control. I enjoyed it. And it was time to myself. And those are similar things that I still carry on to this day. Like going out for a run in the morning is a reset for me. And it sets the intention for my day. So when I went back to trying to run, I could see the differences it was making in my own mentality, how much better I felt overall. I was not just measuring my progress in running, but attributing running to taking on other tasks. If I can complete a run, I can complete this assignment. If I can complete a run, I can finish this course and do what I have to do to graduate. But it was the test for everything.
I hear the determination through each step of this and your ability to really stay in tune with your body and be like, okay, we're going to take this in small increments. We'll start by just running a mile. Were there any points where you were thinking that you may not be able to do this or accomplish the big goals that you were looking to? How did you navigate each of those setbacks or moments of self-doubt of, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do what I want to do living with lupus?
That's a great question. I remember having the first tinkling of self-doubt or that life would look a little bit different when I was actually in the hospital. At the time, I thought I wanted to be a physical therapist. That requires being fairly physical and working with your hands and moving clients and things like that. I was like, is that still possible? Am I going to keep pursuing that career, which I ended up doing for a little bit, but obviously that's not what I do now. But I remember that was the first inkling of knowing my life trajectory may be different from what I had planned. And I remember asking myself okay, is this the moment where I choose to have the courage to pursue what it is I actually wanted, which was go back into dance or maybe a different career. I didn't quite know what it was, but I could feel like, okay, if this isn't going to work out, do I be brave enough to stand up to my parents and stand up to society and say, oh, we have to pivot. But when it comes to the running piece, it's hard to remember a time, honestly. I think if I hadn't done a race by myself prior to getting diagnosed, things might have looked a little bit differently. But because I had already self-trained for that first 5K, I did. I went to a race. I saw the community. I saw how many people just love doing this.
Mhm.
I was like, okay, I want to be there. It was maybe like a big resurgence in running too. New training apps were coming out and clubs were becoming a big thing. I had things that I could see and experience that kind of made that firm that this is a place that I could be.
Yeah, I know since your diagnosis, you've had involvement with 14 marathons that you've run, 5 ultras, the Speed Project, and that historic run from Boston to New York. Mireille, which one means the most to you and why? Okay.
That's a hard question because each race brings its own adventure. But I always like to recount the feeling of crossing my first marathon, Los Angeles Marathon, March of 2017, because as I went back into running and working out and trying to seek these challenges, I eventually graduated and then moved back to LA and started to immerse myself in the community here. We had great resources at the time. So I started going to a run club, and that was my first introduction to more structured training for distance running. So I'm showing up at run club and we have these group long runs on Saturdays, and I'm still working up to things. Like I having a good day, but I can do 10 miles at this point. And I see folks who are training, doing half marathon distance, 13.1 and up on these weekends, just casually. And I'm mind blown because I do 10 miles at the time and I need a nap at the day. I cannot imagine doing, doing 13 and just going out to brunch, you know? So I was like, okay, that's going to be the next thing. I trained for one half marathon, did that, then did another half marathon. And I was like, okay, is it marathon time? Let's give it a go. Joined a different run club that was training for the LA Marathon. My personal marker was like, if I can get through this training and cross the finish line, I will personally believe that I'm good to go. At this point, my labs were showing that I was in remission, but I was like, let's test it out. Let's see. And going through the training process, I learned how much discipline can be involved in running, especially when you're doing the half to marathon. But I found out that I love that structure and I love that routine, kind of anchoring your days and your weeks with that one goal in mind. Huge. And you're doing it with a group of people. Huge. So it's my first marathon. I'm trying a lot of things out. I don't know what I don't know. And then comes race day and I'm just all in, like I am going for it. I have a very audacious goal for someone's first marathon. I thought I would crack 4:30 or 4:20, and I'm going for it. Only to cramp up so terribly bad that I ended up in the medic tent. Very cautiously minded because it hadn't happened in training. I was like, oh my God, did I completely blow it? Am I going to get sick again? I'm just going to go and sit down for a bit. And I was in that tent for about 20 minutes, just going through these scenarios. And I was like, I looked at the time, I looked at my watch, and I was like, okay, I can finish this. I can still do it. And so I got out of the tent. I think I had 4 or 6 miles to go. And I finished in 4 hours and 55 minutes, my first marathon. And I remember
Wow.
that feeling of crossing the finish line. Oh my God. It's my favorite because after I did that, everything else opened up. It's like if I can train for 4 months, run 26.2 miles and finish, oh my God, what else can I do? So the first marathon is always the biggest for me because it really just opened the floodgates. Like if I hadn't done that and experienced that, there wouldn't be 13 other marathons. There wouldn't be like an inkling to try and do trail running and do ultras and do these like long distance stuff. But the fact that I got through that cycle in one piece, proving to myself that like, okay, the remission is real. I've got the routine down. I can run this far and this much and still be okay. And I'm just like, okay, we're good to go.
That's truly unbelievable. I've only done one half marathon, and that was before my lupus diagnosis. And I know how grueling these races can be. So
Mhm.
props to you for accomplishing what you have.
Thank you.
I am curious how you take care of yourself during the training process. Because, like I said, these races are grueling and
Mhm.
you've done even longer runs than marathons. So, how are you taking care of yourself and making sure that you're not cramping up or you're not going into a flare throughout the process?
Yeah. Honestly, that process has gotten better with age because what was I like 26 when I ran that first marathon, 35 now. Things have to shift. And you find that out along the way. In the beginning, it was a lot of, doing what I saw other people do as far as recovery. They didn't necessarily have an autoimmune or chronic illness, but, I got into the foam rolling. I went to get massages. I was trying all these different modalities that did make me feel good. But I think that one thing that has changed from then to now is a more importance on sleep. I think as things have changed and I go through minor flares, maybe some bigger flares, I really learned that my anchor has to be getting enough sleep on the day to day. And so that's kind of like my prime focus now. And I went from kind of basing everything around the training schedule to basing everything around like getting the hours. Right. And if I'm waking up one morning and I'm not feeling up to it, maybe I'll give myself like 30 more minutes to see if it's going to be a good day to go or a good day to rest. So sleep has become the number one thing. Bedtime routine, everything that gets involved with that. I think the second for me would be nutrition. I think a fallacy that a lot of folks can fall into when it comes to like doing that sort of high volume training is like, oh, I can eat whatever I want and be okay. Not the same with autoimmune conditions when your diet isn't as tailored as it should be, right? To account for inflammation, to account for changing disease activity, things like that. And while it's always important to eat enough, I think that's always going to be one of my number one messages. We want to still eat enough of the quote unquote right things for someone's body. So for me, it goes sleep, nutrition. I'm a big proponent of meal prep. So just to give me one less thing to think about during the week, and also making sure that like I'm eating in as much as possible food that I have seen and touched and prepared myself that I know really work for me, and having enough of that. The third would be not your traditional recovery modality, but I personally see it as just like a recovery lifestyle modality. It's finding ways to be in community. So going back to a run club or, on my long runs, I usually will text one of my friends during the week to see like, hey, do you want to go and do this together? So I'm not like out there by myself, and we can catch up, we can get coffee after. Yeah. And just being engaged in community, going to events, finding folks who maybe are training on the same timeline or for the same race and encouraging each other too, just to kind of keep the spirits up.
Yeah, I think all three of those are absolutely vital in maintaining your health. Sleep, nutrition, and social connection, especially social connection, can be a game changer in getting yourself motivated and into a positive space. But I also want to touch a bit further on nutrition because I'm curious about what are the right foods for you.
I'm a big sweet potato fan. I have
Nice.
sweet potatoes every week. Literally, do not get tired of it. Sweet potatoes. I mean, that's the anchor. I think everything else, because I do like to meal prep and try different recipes, I find myself like rotating and trying like new things. So I'm always trying to make sure that like if I had beef and salmon 1 week, maybe next week I'm doing chicken and turkey. So I'm getting different flavors and different dishes. Yeah, it's a hard question. Aside from sweet potatoes, which I can't get enough of.
It's nice to have those go-tos. I'm obsessed with avocados that you can
Mm,
never give me enough.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I was curious just because the inflammation piece and then running with the joint pains, like what were you consuming to be able to keep that all at bay? But what you're talking about makes total sense.
Yeah, yeah.
So to get into your coaching, you specialize in coaching runners with autoimmune conditions. What makes your approach different from any other typical running coach?
Yes. So I would say, lived experience has a great deal to do with that. Going back to when I was clear to exercise and, my rheumatologist giving me the okay, but not really being able to tell me the plan or a sort of progression that I could take. And it was a lot of and of one, figuring out on my own. But a lot of the training that I was doing at the time was based on Gen Pop, right? It was based on the available training plans and what I saw other people doing in group workouts and run clubs and things like that. And then over time, as you know, I'm still learning more about lupus and different lifestyle changes that you have to do to kind of live as cohesively as you can. You start to see that following a general plan could be good, but they don't account for the flares or mental toll of taking medications and doctor's visits and all these other things that the autoimmune community has to deal with on a day-to-day basis. Or just like when you do happen to flare, you feel sick, like how do you pivot? How much time do you take off? Right. There's the general plan can't really account for those things. And after making a few career shifts and going deeper into running with the marathons and with the races, I really started to think like, okay, how can I contribute to the community a little bit more and give folks an option who might have been, who might be in the same position as I was with like wanting to start running or wanting to improve in their running or just start a movement practice. But all they're seeing online is, folks who coach generally, and they might not, or they might have worked with a coach, but the coach didn't know what to do when it came to their flares or adjusting things for them. So yeah, that lived experience really helps me tailor to that, my educational background as well. And also I think my willingness to just like do the research, like to learn about the different conditions that are out there and figure out like how to tailor things to those particular symptoms as well. We know that, there's a lot of overlap with various diagnoses, but still when you get into the nitty gritty of things, like someone with Hashimoto's might need something a little bit different from someone with lupus, right? But as long as there's like a good base level of understanding, I was like, I'm able to see them because I've been in their journey. I can share things that have worked for me. And they're able to, have an example of someone that was in their shoes once, but was able to go on and do these other things.
Yeah. I appreciate that so much because I remember after one of my knee surgeries, I wanted to get back into exercising. I've grew up playing sports, love working out because mentally I'm a different person after I work out. But my doctor cleared me and he's like, yeah. And so I start doing HIIT workouts and that did not go well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the other piece of it, it's like, I'm wondering, do you have to start like training for a marathon even sooner to build in those rest and recovery days? Or how do you adjust people's workout or running schedules when a flare might pop up?
Yeah. I'd say when it comes to starting a training program, health history and activity history really play a big role. Like I have to see, am I working with someone who was exercising before a diagnosis and maybe they're getting back into it, or is this like a new adventure for someone? Because then we might not even be looking at running to start. We might be looking at walking to start, right? I always say, great walkers make really good runners because in walking, you're used to going outdoors. You're used to like doing something on a schedule already. And that's going to be huge when those walks turn into runs, because when someone goes out on a run and they aren't as experienced or they don't really know what to expect, it can be really overwhelming. And then they end up maybe shutting down because it seems too big. But if we can start with walking for, I'd say at least a month, I'm a coach that really takes time with things. So to your point, if you're coming to me and you're like, I signed up for this race in 4 months, I'm going to go, okay, well, we actually need maybe 6 months to get to there. And so maybe we can look at a different race or, figure out a different goal here. Because yeah, setting the basis is so important to future success. And setting the base means like walking consistently to running consistently. It means putting some mobility on the calendar. If folks aren't used to just sort of like doing a 10-minute stretch routine, that's something we definitely have to talk about. And I have like kind of 5 pillars, I'd say, that I work through with folks month to month. So movement is one, nutrition, lifestyle, and stress management. There are 2 more that I'm forgetting at the moment, but it's really the 5 sort of goals that ground us. And we start from month 1, and I'm able to sort of build a timeline of where we want to be in month 6, whether that is the race or that is just like, running on your own continuously, whatever that may be. And as far as adjusting for flares and things like that, and I do a little bit of a stoplight protocol. So red, yellow, green light. And every week on our training platform, I'm checking in with folks, right? I'm seeing like, how was your sleep? How did this run feel? Getting the verbal feedback and also comparing that with what I'm seeing in the data, right? So if they're telling me that, oh, this run felt easy, but I can see that their heart rate was like super high for this particular run, or the pace just wasn't there, I make a note of it. Like maybe it's not something to be alarmed about, but I'm tracking things on the back end of things. So then when things maybe start to catch up with them, I'm able to see sort of where in the timeline that could have occurred. And I built in like recovery weeks, regardless of who I'm working with. And I always do at least 1 rest day a week. I think that should be included in every training protocol, to be honest. But for someone who is going to flare, or, they're telling me that like I'm changing jobs and I have a move coming up, I'm like, okay, so that's going to be even more built-in recovery weeks. So it's a lot of like communication between me and them. I like to say like, I may be the coach, I may have the credentials, I may have the background on this, but this is also your life and your adventure. So the more we can like collaborate and work together, the more seamless the process can be. And you can feel like you have a stake in the game, right? You have some autonomy in it, because eventually the goal would be that you don't need to work with me, right? Because you will have learned the tools and the patterns and things like that you learn throughout coaching in order to go on and do it on your own.
I love that. And something that you're saying that I've often wondered about with my own training is how to tell the difference between normal training fatigue and a
Mm,
flare. So
yeah.
with running, especially, how
hmm
do you know the difference? How do you know it's just not it's not just a regular running fatigue? How do you know when it's a flare and you need to like truly rest?
Yeah. So running fatigue will almost always resolve with some amount of rest, right? That's why there's a rest day after a long run, because you shouldn't really be going up back to back, depending on, the level of athleticism you have. But if you're feeling tired, if a muscle is sore, maybe you feel sluggish on a run, like if you are able to take a day or 2 off and bounce back, that's going to be running related fatigue. But if you do the same thing, but then you try and come back and you maybe feel worse or just about the same, your sleep's starting to get disrupted. Maybe you're feeling some of your own like classical signs of what a flare may feel like in the joints or the sore throat feeling, which is something that's really common for me. You can really start to point we're heading towards a flare territory. It's especially the number one thing is if rest isn't resolving it, you should start to take caution.
I think we can all relate to those times where we overdid it and didn't give ourselves enough time to actually rest and recover. That can be so discouraging, especially when we have big goals we want to meet. So I'm curious how you help people make mindset shifts to get through those periods of time where we may feel a bit more discouraged because we can't do what we want to be able to do.
Yeah, that's a great question. What's coming to mind for me is a conversation I have with folks about that before and after, that diagnosis being like the defining line. And so maybe they ran before and they have an understanding of what their abilities were prior to diagnosis, and they're trying to get to that same level. The phrase I like to tell folks is this, like, you're not going to get anywhere chasing a ghost, right? Because a lot of the mental conflict comes from that comparison of their past selves or what they know they used to be able to do. And so when something like that comes up in their current training where they're like, man, I need 2 rest days. Back in the day I could do this, no problem. Like, that was great. Number one, give thanks to the person you were, because if you hadn't tried then, you wouldn't be where you are now. That's going to be a big one. Like, you're not starting from scratch. You've got some of the tools, what works for you, what we can use in this current instance. But to try and be that person you were, or the version that you're holding in your head, is going to do you a disservice. So we say thank you to who they were, but we also have to let them rest. And when we can say thank you and goodbye to that person, then we have more energy to give to where we currently are. So the mindset shifts comes from like building a version of themselves to look forward to work towards, as opposed to like working backwards to get back to instead.
I'm wondering as well, like when you're dealing with folks who may not have that sort of tenacity that you have, and there's a lot of doubt, there's a lot of ways in which the voices that are discouraging are louder than any other voice. How do you help them overcome that?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think as much as I talk about the importance of movement and how exercise can help with disease activity, I think it's very fair for someone to see me say that and be like, well, that's easy for you. You've done 14 marathons. I'm like, I get it.
Yeah, right.
That's hard. But I didn't start here. I didn't start with 14. So I think for me, the more I can sort of say that foundational story, the more people can see themselves in the space that they really are.
No doubt.
I didn't get diagnosed and then decide to be like, like I said, I started with a mile. I started with walking without like having to stop and take a breath. The the marathon, I didn't even know I'd ever run a marathon, if that makes anybody, like, it was just not even on my radar at the time. I was just, I wanted to go back to running that mile so I could do that 5K. And so I really try to rely on that foundational story and also try and explain like why I stuck for so long. I didn't stick to it for so long because I knew I wanted to do a marathon. I stuck with it because it was something that I could control. It was something that I could measure. It had nothing to really do with anybody else's expectations. That can be a big thing for folks. It's just like, I really was doing it for me to get back to the health that I knew I could achieve again, even if it looked differently from before. But it was something that gave me something to work towards.
Thank you for that. That's inspiring.
Yeah, and that's a really unique, helpful perspective because you're not chasing after the external validation. And I appreciate looking at the here and now, like thanking your past self because you wouldn't be where you are without your history. But where we're at right now is the most important thing to focus on because that validation, the self-confidence that comes internally, I appreciate your insightful perspective on that.
Thank you.
With all of your incredible accomplishments, and you've been through a lot with your lupus journey, I want to ask, what does invisible strength mean to you?
I think invisible strength means following that inner light, the voice that doesn't always get heard, but if you tune in, they're usually trying to guide you in your best direction, getting rooted in that, getting strong in that. And I say this because with autoimmune conditions, you can tend to hear a lot of noise, right? About what you should do, what medication you should take, what your lifestyle should be, all these other shoulds. But if you tune in, look within, find that inner light, you will find the strength to do what is right for you. At the end of the day, for someone with a diagnosis, that's going to be what helps the most. What do I feel I need? What are my needs at the moment? How can I speak up and stand up for myself in a world that's always trying to tell me what I should do?
I love the image of the inner light. It's your bigger why and going back to what's most important to you at this point in time. I appreciate that.
What are some like goals, hopes, if not literal marathons, sort of like metaphorical races that you're looking forward to taking on in the future? Like, what is the next goal for you coming up?
Yeah, it's twofold because I look at, my own training, but also my business. So I'm always looking forward to how can I help more people? How can I refine my own coaching approach? Being a lifelong learner is very important to me. So I still take classes, I still get certifications. I try to really stay within the research and autoimmune world because I can use that info to improve the training. So that's a continuing goal of mine. And as far as training, I still run, I still straight train. I'm looking forward to Marathon 15, which will be February of next year. And another half marathon in that mix. January and February are going to be my race season. So right now I'm doing the prep so I can be fully in it in the fall once the training actually starts to pick up. Yeah.
You have a lot going on. So I'm curious, how do you balance coaching and your training and just life in general with lupus? How do you keep it all in line so you're not overdoing it?
Yeah, as a recovering perfectionist and
Welcome.
thank you. And as someone who grew up with some hyper independence and value came from how busy you were and things like that, and having to completely unlearn that after diagnosis, I really learned the importance of prioritization. I think, especially with yes, coaching and training and trying to live a life, coming to understand that I can't do it all in just a day. So I've gotten to a point where, like, if I'm looking at my week ahead, I sort of pick, like, okay, this is going to be a hyper focused work day. But the next day, I really need to make sure I do that meal prep so that I'm okay for the rest of the week. So it's really just like letting go of needing to fit it all in the few hours we have in a day, and making the most of the 2 or 3 things that I deem like the most important for that day.
Yeah, you had mentioned meal prepping earlier. It's week prepping, making sure
Hmm.
you're building in enough buffers throughout the
Hmm.
week so you're not overdoing it. Because I'm guilty of that too. It's like, got to complete my whole to-do list, and that
Hmm.
just never ends well.
Yeah.
Oh, it's too
Yeah.
much.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's too much.
We don't need that guilt.
Not at all.
No.
The blessing of rolling it over to the next week. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes. Yeah.
Right. We so appreciate you being here. Where can people find you on socials and learn more about working with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so happy to be on with you today. My most active on Instagram. You can find me at Hey Coach Mireille. My website is coachbymireille.com if you want to learn more about me, but also more about coaching, whether it's running or AIP.
Fantastic. And to our community, make sure you visit invigorateyourjourney.com. You'll find more episodes there and other community resources and coaching services to best support you on your journey. So until next time, take care. Peace.